Welcome, everyone. I'm here with Amanda B. Amanda, welcome.
Hi, thank you.
Great to be with you today. We're going to be talking about how to create an efficient briefing with your client, and briefing will be used as a consultation, request for information, and all kinds of other stuff that we'll work through as we talk together. Tell us a little. First of all, great to be here with you. Where are you located right now?
I am in Danville, Pennsylvania.
Ooh, interesting.
Yes.
Where's the
East Coast.
nearest city location that our guests might know about?
About 2 hours from New York City, about 2.5 from Philly, right in between.
Gotcha. Very
Yeah,
good. Well, that's a good place to be. You can
it's not bad. Yeah,
swing over either way. Good for you.
exactly.
So tell us a little bit about your background. I know you've been with WriterAccess for a while. Tell us a little bit about your illustrious background.
So I've been a writer forever. I'm a big believer in you don't choose to be a writer; it chooses you. Um, I mean, I was writing for my middle school newspaper, and from there on up, I just wrote more and more. I got my professional start as a teacher, and then my sister started working with WriterAccess, and she was
Ooh,
like, "Hey, yeah," she said, "I think you could do this too." And that was around 2015, I believe.
wow.
And then my son was born in 2017. So that's when I really decided, this is something I can do and be here with him and have the flexibility that I need. So I had written professionally here and there for some blogs for Penn State's alumni magazine. But I really dug into writing full time in 2017, and it's just gotten bigger and better from there.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for your great service to probably hundreds of clients. Do you actually know how many assets you've created?
Oh my
I'm
gosh.
just
I looked the other day. I think it's at like 6,800
wow.
articles.
Wow,
It's a lot.
that's so fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, lucky us and lucky clients that I know have been thrilled with you. You're one of our superstars here. So
Thank you.
thanks for all you do. And let's dive in. I'm sure people would be really interested to learn about you and your work. And so let's fire it up a little bit.
Sure.
In general, what kind of content creation services are you creating? Let's sort of start with that so people can frame this with the type of work that you enjoy creating and are doing a lot of work in.
Yeah, I'm doing right now both short and long form articles, blog posts of varying lengths, a lot of social media posts, which I often create. Like a client will give me what they need for a month, and I create all of them for that at once. Something I've been working on recently are interview summarizations.
Mhm.
So a client will send me an interview they did with someone, and I make that information into an article.
Fantastic. And what kind of what form are they giving you the interview in? Is it written transcription or is it the actual recording?
My favorite client does both, which
Okay,
is awesome.
that's great.
Um, yeah, it's a little bit harder when it's just audio, because sometimes you're not super sure what someone said, or it can be hard to tell who's talking. So having both of those is amazing.
You mentioned the word favorite client. I think that's a
Yes.
lovely phrase, and hats off for that client to be referred to as a favorite client. What are the characteristics that a favorite client of yours has?
They are very easy to communicate with.
Mhm.
So it's tough sometimes with clients who aren't as responsive when I'm halfway through their order, their piece, their content, and they don't get back to me with the question until very close to the deadline, because then I end up having to rush, and I don't ever want to do that. So when a client can respond to me within 24 hours is fine. It gives me that time to take the information that may have been missing in their content brief, or if something was unclear, and really put that to good use. And also, I feel like great clients are pretty specific in telling me what they want. And sometimes they say, we don't know, just be creative and we'll work with it. And that's totally fine. But when a client has a specific vision, the more information they can give me, the easier it is for me to create what they're looking for.
How long did it take you to understand what the silver bullet content creation project would look like for that favorite client? How long did it take to you to understand what they want and to begin to anticipate greatness?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think really after the first order, I'm thinking of a few different clients that have been really great to work with, when they say to me, this was great. You stayed within what we asked you to do. Here's what we loved. And here's some stuff to think about for next time. And then using that as a framework, you're really, really able to meet those expectations.
Great advice
Yeah,
there.
it's really helpful when they do that.
Was your sense, certainly by now they're an experienced pro and working with freelancers like you, but was your sense that they did have experience working with freelancers prior to working with you? Or were they new to the platform and new to this concept of outsourcing content when they first started with you?
This client in particular was new.
Yeah.
And we it's nice when a client recognizes that it's a learning process for both of us.
Mm-hmm.
That I'm not going to be able to read their mind and they can't read mine, and to have it just have like the friendly back and forth is so helpful. And it also, like, having that conversation allows me to get to learn their tone and kind of, as I don't know, as non-scientific as it is, but to like get the vibe of the company and know the kind of voice they're looking to put forward. That's so helpful.
Now, most of the communication going through the WriterAccess platform is written communication back and forth. Do you miss that opportunity to talk with a client directly? Has your client ever used voice communications? Because you can request time with a client and talk with them, and you're compensated for that, by the way, by the minute, which is cool. Yeah. We should probably raise our rates, by the way, because it's a super valuable piece of opportunity to hear a client's tone and voice. How important was that to you, and how often did you actually speak with customers using that as part of your briefing process with a customer?
Not frequently, but I have used it a handful of times. I personally, and maybe it's just because I'm a writer, I prefer the written communication.
Right.
It's just easier for me to go back to, and it is nice because you guys provide the recording of any conference call that we have. But to find, like, to move the thing and find, like, oh, where did they give this instruction? It's just easier to have it written. And I also find that my clients who I have conference calls with, they're often still in the process of figuring out what they want as we're talking, which I'm happy to talk through with them. But it often goes from the beginning of the conversation, they want one thing, by the end, they want another thing. And that's a little bit rough. And I find that when they just send me the completed brief, they've already answered those questions. They've thought
it through.
Their
That's
tone
really,
and SEO and call to action and all of that kind of stuff already.
Yeah. Okay. And what about voice messaging, where a client's just talking into the voice message? Has that ever happened? Have they ever used that?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
No, I don't think so.
I'll more about my frustration about that later, because I do think that it's interesting to hear, particularly a client's voice for the first time, just their actual voice.
Yeah.
How they talk and how they communicate.
Yeah.
That was why we originally brought that into fold, like literally 12 or 13 years ago. On another podcast I was doing for Life Tips, I was interviewing, it was a life coach who I was interviewing, and they were talking about how they could really assess a prospect patient of theirs or student of theirs within a few minutes of talking with them, based upon how they were talking about their problems.
Yeah.
And I thought that was fascinating. So I thought bringing these brief, voice messagings, which are free of charge, a customer can add a voice message to an order that they place with a writer for no additional cost, thinking that the writer could listen to it on their own time and sit there and play it while they're reading the proper instructions.
That would be nice.
That's what I said.
Yeah.
But strangely enough, no one uses it. I don't understand why. So
I've never, now in 9 years, I've never received one. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we'll think on that hard together, and I'll open a ticket myself in the customer support level, say,
Perfect.
hey, why aren't you guys using this? So, okay, let's go back to an interesting question, and that is, if you had a magic wand, what would you change in the way clients communicate with you, how they communicate with you more specifically regarding the needs for a particular project? And another way to look at that is like, how much guesswork are you doing with clients that you're maybe more frustrated with? But if you had a magic wand, what would you tell these clients to do?
So I have like a great client I'm thinking of, and one that's a little more challenging. The client that I really, really appreciate, they tell me the feeling they want their reader to have after they're done with the content.
Interesting.
It's something along the lines of, we want them to feel like they were talking to a friend who really knew their stuff. That's a lot more helpful to me than just tone, relatable. And on the other end of that, I have some clients who will just send me a link and say, make an article that explains this. And that's it. So I don't know if I'm supposed to include a call to action, or if they're interested in SEO. That can be tough just when there's not enough information. And also on the SEO note, it's great when clients tell me like, this is our audience. That helps me figure out how to incorporate not only the terms that they give me, but other terms that may be helpful for SEO. I have another client who just says like, optimize this for search engines. Okay, who are you trying to reach?
Yeah.
I don't really know what to do with that. But yeah, the information about this, the feeling they want their audience to have, and who their audience is, it's so helpful. I'm going to write very differently to an audience of kids in college than I am to an audience that's 65 plus. So just having that information is super helpful.
So for the client that is not providing to you that important question of what's the right feeling, and I loved your example, by the way, talking to a friend that knows their stuff like that, that we can visualize that, we can see that conversation happening. And we know the smart, savvy know-it-alls that sound very impressive, and you can emulate that with a written word. However, for that client that doesn't take the instructions to that level, what are you doing at that point? Are you feeding back questions to them rather quickly? And do you worry that, if they don't respond, you're really going to be left on a wild goose chase, yet maybe they don't care in the end of the day, they just want an asset? So what's the fine line, and how do you feel that out? And how would you like, again, the magic wand question, what would you like clients to be doing for you? We get the feel, tell us more about the target audience, but what about if they didn't include that? What do you do as next steps? Maybe, answer my emails, answer my in platform communication, please.
It really depends on the length of the content they're requesting. So if it is a 300-word summary of something, and I can take it and run with it, and it's not going to be a hugely time-consuming thing if it needs to be adjusted, I'll just do it. And I'll say to them like, hey, let me know if this is what you were looking for. If you need any changes, feel free to send back a revision. If it's something more extensive, where I'm going to be spending hours getting to the end point, then usually I won't only message them. I'll also message our
support
team. And say like, hey, have you talked to this client? Am I moving in the right direction here? Can you give me any insight? And I will generally, with that, I'll wait to hear from the client as long as I can. And if I don't get the information I need, I will certainly move forward as long as that's possible. I have had sometimes where clients have sent me a broken link and told me to add to this content, and that's like, hey, I'm sorry, I can't just make it up. But generally, I'm able to work with what I have, and the more that the client can communicate with me, I do it pretty much all through the platform, unless it's a separate thing that's been approved through Google Docs or anything like that. But the more that they can respond to me, the better. The more information I have, the more I can give them what they want.
You mentioned the support team at WriterAccess.
Mm-hmm.
How important is that team to you? And shout out to Lindsay, of course, who runs that team. Amazing.
Yeah. The biggest shout out to Lindsay in the world. Yes.
Right on. Go, Lindsay. What percentage of your jobs require some help on the CS team's support? And what are typical supports that would, again, help you create better content that they're able to help you with?
Yeah. Not many.
Yeah.
Not many orders require support. I'm trying to think, I'd say maybe 5%. It's not a common thing. But when you need it, you need it. And they're so helpful. They respond really quickly. Some stuff that I like, sometimes clients contradict themselves in their instructions and don't respond when I question them. And I have to say to the support team, like, hey, how should I move forward with this? Unclear instructions. Sometimes if I've gone back and forth with the client and I've asked the questions I need the answers to move forward, and I'm still not getting those answers, I'll reach out to them and I'll say, hey, could you look at my communication with this client? I need some help here, figuring out how to move in the right direction. They are so fantastic. They're great.
Awesome. Tell me a little bit about the creative brief that's both inside WriterAccess that our clients have access to, that can be attached to an order, and other creative briefs that you've used over the years. Maybe you even have some of your own templates that you've suggested clients work with. Has the concept of a creative brief changed much? And tell us about the way clients are filling out the creative briefs inside of WriterAccess. Is it helpful? Is it giving you good information in that sort of standard stock checklisty sort of methodology that we've designed that? And have you even seen many of those? What percentage of your orders use that internal creative brief that we have at WriterAccess?
Most do. And I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
I do have some clients who also attach additional information, which is fine. And I can work with that. I prefer personally when it's just all there in what you guys provide. It can get very, very tedious if I am working with both information that's provided within the platform. And then I also have a 3-page Word document about formatting. If they can condense that to be all in one place, that's helpful. And another thing that can be helpful within that internal brief, if they just provide me a link to something that has already been done for their website that they really like, and they want to continue that style or that tone or that formatting, I can work with that. Sometimes that's great if they're not really able to verbalize what style, tone, format they're looking for. But yeah, as much as they can put into that brief, it's fantastic. And also a lot of clients use the checklist format where I, as the writer, have to check off yes, it's formatted in this way, and the images are taken from this site. Yeah. And that's helpful because sometimes, I'm going through that and it's like, oh, I took the image from a different site. Now that saves them having to file a revision and me having to go back and correct it later. And it's nice to have that visual list of necessary components.
Yeah. Those rule sets, by the way, we developed early on, and they are so helpful. Yeah. Ironically, when we designed them, we thought they'd be helpful more for clients, but actually writers love them because it's like a checklist at the end of did I accomplish the goals and objectives?
Yeah.
Got it. So that's really interesting to surface that as an important part of the creative briefing process, if you will.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about your own consistent and or not variable, tone and style that you use in your writing. I've coined this phrase over the years as style flexing, which I think is Andy Crestodino, one of my favorite people in the world, and one of the content marketing conferences. I was interviewing him and helping him with a recording for one of his sessions, and we stumbled on this, and he's like, "Man, that is so awesome." Do you find that you are able to, do you enjoy flexing your style for different projects? Are you able to? Do you view your skill as a writer as being able to flex fluently, if that's another F word that we can throw in the mix, without too many F words, by the way. Is that, tell me a little bit about that, about tone and style and flexing your voice for particular clients. And how do you know how to get that voice, the right tone and style flex for that client or that project?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like I've been in writing so long and I've always been a reader. So I have kind of an internal file of different voices, and I'm able to turn those into what the client needs. For me, excuse me, for me, personally, I tend to write in a speaking directly to my audience manner. So if I'm not given direction, that's what I tend to go for. But I certainly don't have to do that. I can write more formally, more informally, really just, whatever they need. And sometimes a client will ask me for something and I'll be able to like read something that's written in that same style to kind of get my mind in the right place. I do enjoy doing that. It's almost like acting in a way, like putting on a mask to be a different voice.
That is exactly right.
Yeah. And it takes some practice. But once you nail it with a client and you have exactly the voice they're looking for, it's so much fun. And it's especially another great client that I had recently. The first order I wrote for them was just not the tone that they wanted. They hadn't specified a tone, but they reached out to me and they said, hey, like, this just isn't what we're looking for. And they gave me a little bit more direction. And I revised it and sent it back to them. They're like, this is exactly it. So sometimes like that communication back and forth is just everything in helping them get the content that they want.
I could talk about that for a very long time with you. It's a fine line to encourage a client to request revisions, particularly in the first orders that they're completing with a project, versus tarnishing their perception that every 5-6-star WriterAccess is like unbelievable and we should just take their content and run with it. Do you have, again, if you had a magic wand, you're a person that respects a client's thoughts and desires. What would you say to a client that is reluctant to give you the feedback, particularly on the first few orders?
Yeah, just please do. Like, it's a learning process on both ends. Often, and I know clients are learning the system too when they're brand new. Often when I get a revision from a client on the first order I do for them, I have a moment of like, you could have put that in the content brief. It would have been great. But they don't know that yet. They're still figuring out what they want, and they may not know that what they're asking for isn't quite what they actually want for the end product until they get it. And then they say like, oh, actually, we would have liked shorter paragraphs or a more direct to consumer tone. And it's a learning process for everyone. I would really encourage them to say, hey, here's what we actually want. And then see what those writers that they give that feedback to, see how they respond, and if they make those adjustments in a way that they want, then that's someone they can run with, who's really interested in creating what they're looking for.
This might be summarized with a wonderful expression that I learned from my late father, Jefferson White, who was a professor of philosophy at the University of Maine in Maine, where I grew up. And he said, Byron, you should never be afraid of your ignorance, but try to hide your stupidity.
That is perfect. Yeah.
And that's, I think in many ways, that's what we're dealing with here. Many people new to platforms or to working with freelancers in general don't understand how the process should work and how iterations and revisions are critical in the first few phases. And I fault the academic world for many reasons. You submit your your term paper and you get one round of fairly quick revisions from your professor, and boom, you either hit the ball out of the park, or you're not going to maintain your 4.0 average, and there's
Right.
there's no in between. So
Right.
writing is rewriting. I think we all know that, and no one's more guilty of that than me. I was looking through some old files from WriterAccess, and I would have like 7 or 8 versions of a ridiculous email campaign that I would be sending out.
Yeah. Yeah.
We of course know the language of final version 1, final version 2.
Final version for real.
Yeah.
No, really. Yeah.
We're writers. This is what we do. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that was an encouraging moment when we start thinking a little bit about how to work with a client, how to encourage them to be brave and to offer as much criticism as possible. Well, not as much as possible, but intelligent criticism that helps guide you to where they want you to go.
Yeah,
right.
for sure.
And that's a very fine line. What distinguishes content that you're delivering from competitive content that they're up against? Are you often looking at competitive content just to see what their angle is, and how do you work your own skills into making your content better than the competition?
Yeah, absolutely. That is, whenever I'm running for a business, that's one of the first things that I do.
Yeah.
I look at their competitors and see what they're doing well and excuse me, what they're not doing well. So one of the things that I see often with just online copy in general is a lack of readability. So it's either so many headlines and headers that it's not cohesive at all. On the other side of that, I see a lot that's like one headline and just blocks of text.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I really do is try to format things in a way that's pleasant to read. And then also looking at what competitors are doing as far as SEO, especially competitors that are doing well, and seeing how I can work those terms and phrases into my clients' copy so they can see that boost in clicks and views.
What are you seeing with new types of formats that you're being asked to create or are stumbling upon yourself as you read more on the web? Call outs,
Yeah.
longer headlines that are actually readable rather than just bullet pointy type of stuff. Are bullet points interesting? Interactive content, what are you seeing there? I mean, I could go on and on and on, but what's appealing to you yourself with engagement, with audience engagement, particularly?
I think lists are fantastic, especially in the format where, they have the introduction to whatever list they're going to be making. And then each number in the list is bolded with a headline and then an explanation beneath, because then the reader can either glance over it quickly and get the gist of it or delve into it for more information. They're not sitting there having to stare at it, trying to pick out the information that they need. And then, they just get frustrated that they can't find it and go somewhere that's easier to read. So I think having that balance, any format that offers a balance of I can look at this quickly or I can get more is really helpful. Almost just like having some sort of an abstract like you would have in a study where they're able to read the short version and the more involved version. Yeah.
Excellent. And what's the most challenging, content project that you've taken on at WriterAccess, either from a time-consuming perspective or having to raise your own skill level or knowledge level to produce something that a client really loved?
Yeah, I have exactly the one.
Ooh,
I had a client who asked me to write like a book geared towards middle schoolers on women's soccer.
Ooh,
I don't really know anything about women's soccer.
right.
And the client was great. How much more challenging it is to tackle a topic that you're not familiar with.
Yeah.
Compared to like I was a track person. If you had asked me to write about that, I could have done that forever. But when you're working with a client who's just totally, their information is, their industry is totally out of your wheelhouse, that's tough. That's tough. I think you can still write it really well, but the time commitment for that is very different than something that you already know a little bit.
Got it. A few more closing questions for you. There always has been and there always will be an art and a science to creating great content.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think the science is changing at all, particularly with the advent of the different research tools that we have right now, like ChatGPT and Google and on and on and on? You know, how is science changing the art and science of content creation, and particularly the expectations and or the speed at which you can create what we would call great content?
I could talk about this for hours.
Yeah, me too.
So yeah, I think the experiences that I've had with exploring what AI has to offer at this point, it's pretty generic. And sometimes that's okay. You know, if someone is looking for a vague overview of something, I can understand how that could work. But I think anyone who is looking for a connection with their audience needs a person who can speak to them, because AI, when it's asked a question, is responding to anyone. You know, the AI doesn't know the particulars of an audience. And sure, you can say, you know, make it at this reading level or gear it towards this age, but there's not the same benefit that comes with a conversation with a client of who are you really trying to reach here? How do you want your company to be viewed? What existing information do you have that you like? What do you not like about what you're already providing? So I think all of those factors give a lot more value to the art side of it. I think as far as the science side, I think ChatGPT can be great for the science side of things. You know, I need to know how this thing works. I need to know instructions for this particular thing. But as far as that actual communication between a business or a person and the people they're trying to reach, I think the art that comes with the human connection aspect of that, I think that's becoming more valuable in the advent of all these tools that can make the science aspect of it easier.
Excellent. I want you to think about two different things with answering that same question in this balance of art and science. One is we have great content, you know, which is in itself an asset that could be created by, I suppose, a human or a bot. But there's also the people aspect of it. You know, David Ogilvy, I'll never forget, once said something to the effect of, if we hire people greater than ourselves, we will become a company of giants. If we hire people lesser than ourselves, we'll become a company of dwarfs. So he drew a polar opposite, like, let's go hire really smart, bright people to run an agency or an internal marketing department or a content marketing department or whatever it may be. So we have to think of great people and what are these great people going to use as their tools. I remember, you know, a lot of excitement over the years with us at Content Marketing Conference. We went out and researched over 200 content marketing tools alone. And by the way, ChatGPT is one of them, right? So, you know, Surf for SEO, you know, SpyFu, you know, it's on it. It's just, it's unbelievable. So for those of us down in the trenches actually creating content, you know, ChatGPT is merely one more tool, and there are many great tools out there that have been creating content for way before even ChatGPT even existed, when OpenAI was a simple platform. But interestingly enough, there were better tools that were being used, like audience research tools, like Rand Fishkin had started. You know, there's a maze of amazing tools. So my question for you, you know, is what will be required of the great writers moving forward, you know, as we think about the demand to create even better content? Because we know that there's like too much crappy, bad content in the world. You know, the question is, who's going to create this great content that will quickly rise to the top? And what are the skills of those great writers, which you, Amanda, clearly have because you've been with us for so long and produced thousands of writers. But tell me about your skills and your advice to other great content creators. When is it time to step it up? Where would you go? What tools would you get to know better to take your own skills to the next level? And the answer might not be a list of 25 things you have right now, but what does your tech board look like or your skill board look like when it comes to raising the game?
Yeah. So one thing I've been researching is just what makes content human. Like what makes something that I write different from something that AI writes. And learning more about speaking to people in a way that fosters that connection. Also, this is just advice to any writer, like you have to keep reading. You have like stories aren't going anywhere. And I think reading is such an important part of developing your own voice, and having your own voice is what creates that great content. That is, so and I'm sure it's because I am, like you said, in the trenches of it. For me, it's pretty simple to see when something is written by AI. And a lot of my clients recently have come to me saying like, hey, we did all this with AI. Can you make it not that way? So just, yeah, recognizing how to reach people and what people appreciate in writing, and kind of going with the mainstream and like reading the best-selling books right now. Like what kind of literature are people connecting with? Like what themes are driving people's interests? And obviously, if I'm writing for a carpet cleaning company, like I do sometimes, I'm not going to be like incorporating Stephen King into it, but just having your finger on the pulse of what language is doing right now and how people are speaking and how people are writing and how it's being received, I think is so important. On a more technical note, I do appreciate Surfer SEO. I do appreciate all of those tools, because you can write the greatest content in the world, and if it's not getting in front of people, it doesn't matter. So I think in that way, AI is super valuable, but you have to put the two of those things together. So the AI tools can be great, but also the humanization part has to still be there, in my opinion, to create content that is both going to get to people and that they'll want to read.
I couldn't agree anymore, and well said. It's funny because we did some really interesting work with the University of Cambridge maybe 5-6 years ago, and developed our own AI-powered algorithm that matched the writing style of a sample that a customer would submit with a couple million samples that our writers had completed, and trying to get into this personality matching, if you will, of the tone and style that you would display in your work, matched up with a sample client. And that human element is, from what I gather, is really hard to get, from a chat GPT. There's a big difference between factual and friendly styles versus honest and simple versus memorable and fun versus bold and unapologetic. These are radically different styles. And, while prompt building is definitely a skill, and something that, we're going to need to take a closer look at. I think it all comes down to style flexing, ironically.
Yeah.
In a brand making a decision with what kind of style they want to emulate with the work that they're cranking out. Red Bull, for example, has a very bold style. They're edgy, they're appealing to, and they've sold a lot of cans of their caffeine concoction. But that human element that you talked about actually relates to the big five personality characteristics that the AI tool that we created was all about. This concept of openness versus consciousness versus extroversion versus introversion, agreeableness, mood. Those personality elements which come from our Psychology 101 class can make their way into the written world.
Sure.
And we did a lot of work trying to figure that out. So look out for the style metrics matcher, and more importantly, some other cool stuff that needs to surface in helping writers have a gateway, to get matched up with clients that understand that there's a bridge here. Like, okay, what's the style you want? Our writers can flex to that style. But the problem is they don't really understand all those variables I was talking about. The other problem is, sadly, our clients need to see something before they say, yes, I like it, or no, I don't like it. So it's almost like we need like a new level of onboarding. We need like brand, tone, and style onboarding. Like maybe that's a new thing. Would that be awesome? Actually, your eyebrows raised. So that was like,
well, that would be so awesome. I was thinking about like, when you go to the optometrist and they're like, which is better, 1 or 2?
Yeah.
I feel like for the clients, like which tone is better, 1 or 2?
Yes.
Okay, 1, here's one kind of like it.
Yeah.
Which one is better? I think that could be so helpful.
Wouldn't it? Yeah. I mean, and that gets it. A, it makes your job easier, but B, it gives you a challenge to, get ranked and rated on how well you're delivering, swimming down that lane of a particular style, and you might find you don't like writing, authoritative content, it's boring for you or something. It's funny because we've had like interesting writers over the years that were like, doctors, that just liked writing. They liked reading and writing. They just wanted but they didn't want to write about their industry. They wanted to write about, exotic topics, or the client that no one, the client that no writer wanted to work with, bring it on, I'll take those crowd orders, they're intellectually stimulating and they give me a chance to flex my style. Right.
Yeah. And especially like some of those, like I said, it can be tough when you're taking on a topic that you don't know anything about, but when it's a topic you want to know more about, it can be super fun.
Yeah. It's funny because the opposite extreme of that is quite interesting as well. I read a great article in Communication Arts Magazine years ago with somebody actually defending 99 Designs. Now, remember 99 Designs is another creative venue where artists compete for their work. And the company was named after like, well, yes, come, pay $100 for a logo and 99 people are going to design it for you, but only one of them gets paid, So on paper, it looked like a disaster. Like, who would put a lot of time into this knowing there's a 1% chance that you're going to get picked?
Yeah.
They've since changed their model, but somebody actually defended 99 Designs. From Communication Arts is a very high-end, amazing magazine for those of you that don't know what that is. It's like the Bible for graphic artists. It's the best of the work is selected for each of their monthly magazines. It's brilliant. It's such a, I have hundreds and hundreds of, I still get the paper version because I just love it so much. But net, their defense was, wait a second here, sometimes creative people like to see a brief project description, apply their science very quickly and throw it out there. It's definitely a throw the spaghetti on the wall concept, but it doesn't mean it's a bad concept, because actually the client wins potentially because they see a lot of variation, style variation. And possibly the artist wins because they have a release for something they can do efficiently, because they're clearly not spending weeks and weeks preparing a logo.
Right.
They're using their expertise and their feel for the industry and their feel for it to almost come up with like a quick multiple choice answer for a pop question.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Maybe that's how we should view this nonsense of ChatGPT. It's like, sure, client, go have at it. Try a few of those blog posts. See if they work for audience. Heck, if no one's reading your blog anyway, and you don't really care about the content, hallelujah, you can publish 4 times a day if you want to. Heck, why not publish 10 times a day and just overwhelm your audience? Wow, look at this publishing machine.
Right.
In the end of the day, Google is certainly not going to reward that virtual content spammer, that is publishing content for the sake of publishing content.
Yeah.
That will go away very simply because there's not enough bandwidth there's not enough football fields filled with Google servers to store and archive all of this content that, by the way, they're actually stealing from us. Just on another side note,
That's a good point.
Google's the largest scraper in the world of content. They don't own any of the content that they scrape and use in their search results. But anyway, that's for another subject. That's for another session here. But it was great chatting with you. How can people get a hold of you in the platform? Of course, they can just do the right search, Amanda B. But tell us a little bit about it. I know you're a 6-star writer. Tell us, what kind of work are you looking for? What are the best clients that should be coming to you?
I am looking for right now, like I said, short, long form articles, blog posts.
Yep.
As far as topics, I have a 6-year-old little bundle of energy.
Nice.
So I love writing about parenting.
Nice.
And my educational background is in mental health, counseling, and education.
Wonderful.
So those topics as well. Yeah.
Amanda B., we are blessed to have you on our team.
Thank
we appreciate so many years and over 6,800 content assets you've created. So on behalf of lots of clients that work with you, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
I know our team loves you too. I just want to throw that, Lindsay included. Heather and Lindsay, the whole team. You're a real true professional in our platform, and we appreciate your work.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thanks for listening, everyone.